I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and today I wanted to talk about healing generational trauma through parenting. And as a parent, this was something that was very important to me. No one's childhood is perfect. We all can go through things, but some individuals experience things in childhood that create additional stressors, or some people have things that have happened in their family, generational trauma, to be more specific, that can really impact the messages that we send to children, the ideas that we have about what's okay and what's not okay, and even the influence of others on our parenting. And one of the biggest things I had to do in knowing that when I found out that I was going to be a mom, that I wanted to do things different. Now, y'all, my mom has been on the show, and this is not at all to downplay anything that my mom did. And there are a lot of people that will say, I was spanked and I turned out just fine. The one thing I want for my child is more than fine. I know that for myself, what the use of physical discipline did is it sent this mixed message that in order to manage my behavior, sometimes things would get to a point where my mom would have to use physical punishment, which meant that her doing that to my body, that was okay based on what I had done. And the thing that I want my child to know is that nobody, not even me as his mom, has the right to put my hands on him in in any way, that his body, that he has body autonomy. Because sometimes what can happen is that there can be this blurring of expectations, these blurring of boundaries. There can be this need for control from the parent of the child. Now, it's one thing to nurture, it's another thing to guide, it's another thing to control. And often when people are looking to control and using physical discipline, yelling, screaming, using blame and shame, doing those types of things to get their way, from my clinical experience, it can lead to just so many issues for that child and for that parent down the road. Now, when we talk about being a parent, there are lots of different types of parenting. There is permissive parenting, and that's someone that just kind of lets the kid do whatever they want, and there's really no guidance at all. There's uninvolved parenting, and that's a parent that's not giving any structure. They're absent. They are being physically, emotionally absent in every way. There is authoritative parenting, and that's my goal, where we're balancing love and discipline. My child has boundaries, and on my stream, there have been times when my child has interrupted. Right now, I am recording this early because I'm not streaming this Saturday, but thank y'all for watching and for supporting the channel. Be sure to leave any questions or anything if you have them. But my door to the office is locked. I am filming from home. And now, if my child came and knocked, I would pause things, I would see what he needed. And his father is in the house. So, like, there's nothing like he would be fine. But just locking the door ensures that I'm not interrupted in the middle of recording. My child, I like to jokingly say, is not a book baby. So, in learning what parenting, what techniques, what things would work best for my child, even as a licensed psychologist that specializes in working with children and teens, whew, my kiddo, there were times that I sought out different resources, different books, different tools, support and advice from people that I truly trusted that were also going down this path of not wanting to use physical discipline, yelling, screaming, things like that at their children. Now, I will tell you that as I'm walking with my child to school, if goes to run into the street, I will raise my voice, I will yell for him to stop, and he will stop. And so, in no way am I saying that there's never a time for you to raise your voice at a child. The one thing I want to model is that I'm not going to just raise my voice at him because I want to be able to control. My goal as a parent is to be a cycle breaker and to do things different. Now, my mom, what she experienced was outright harm. for the things that have happened, the stories that I've heard, she loves her parents. She knows they did the best that they could. The things that were allowed back in the 50s, 60s, those things are illegal now. And she did the best that she could with me. And nothing that she did would have raised to the like legal definition of harm. I do know that the style that she took, it did for me personally, and her and I have talked about this off stream, it caused me to be a people pleaser, and I learned how to get my way. I was very sneaky, very, very sneaky. I lied. I would lie, and I would lie to try to get out of trouble. I would lie to avoid punishment, and then there were times I would come and I would tell the truth. I did feel emotionally safe with my mom. I knew that I could always come to her, and, yeah, I knew there were certain triggers, and one of hers was being lied to, and I think that was one of the last times that she did use any type of physical discipline. I was watching a soap opera. It was her rule that I couldn't watch soap operas, and I lied, like, she was like, "What are you doing?" She called or something, and I was at home by myself. I was, like, 13. I was I was at home by myself, and I said I was cleaning or something. I totally lied. And she came home, she knew that wasn't what I was doing, and what she would do is they would, it was it was my hands, and at the time, I thought it was silly. Did I continue to lie at times? Sure. That didn't change my behavior. It didn't I still thought that the rule of not being able to watch soap operas, I still thought that was silly. I would still sneak to watch them when I could. Uh, and I think she always knew that I was a good kid, so I wasn't sneaking out, I wasn't sneaking around, I wasn't, out partying with friends or anything. As a kid, I didn't have a real curfew, so what would happen is I would ask her like, "Hey, can I go to a 10 p.m. movie?" And then she would know, "Okay, that means you're gonna be home later." And then if me and my friends, if they were like, "Hey, can we go to IHOP?" I would, call her, text her, and ask after the movie if I could go to IHOP. The answer was normally yes, and we would go, I would come home, there were never ever any, really major issues. She did still raise me to be very independent, to value my opinion, to value my thoughts. She never said that, what happened at home stays at home. There are some messages that we can be raised with that can influence our parenting. And I do think that that rule that, what happens at home stays at home, I think that can open the door that if a child is not safe, if something's going on that is not okay, that that won't be disclosed. And so even for our home, if my kid was upset at something from home, like that he could go, he could tell his teacher, he could tell his Gigi, he could go and tell anybody that there is no there are family secrets. There are things that he can't say. When I'm working with clients, I like to talk with them about good secrets and bad secrets. And the one secret, so if we were planning something, a surprise for his dad, then that might be a secret that I would ask him to keep, but I would never, if he ever didn't feel right, if something ever wasn't okay, that those are things that he would be able to share. Another thing is for parents to identify what their triggers are. Our triggers are often ours and tied to our pain, and kids are going to do stuff that trigger adults. It's just going to happen. And the biggest thing I need to do is I need to manage that thing that triggers me. So for me, it's outright defiance. So I ask you to do something and you tell me no, that you're not going to do it. And now I would rather somebody be honest. Does that make sense? So instead of lying and saying, "Oh yeah, I'll do that," and then you just don't do it. Somebody, I ask them to do something and they just no, or do the exact opposite. So for an example, if my this is something popped in my head and it's yeah, that happens. My son knows that he's not supposed to draw on the walls. He's not supposed to put stickers on the walls. He knows all of these things. I cannot tell you the artwork I have all over the house. And the thing, so he has to clean it up. Now, the one artwork, so I was doing something in the refrigerator or something. I knew he was coloring with a marker, and I thought he was still coloring at the refrigerator. But I turned around, and sure enough, I think he was like 2.5 or 3 at some like he was really, really young. I turned around and I have this beautiful work of art on my wall. And I took a breath. Hey, buddy, you draw on paper, not on walls. And he was so young, like, there wasn't a big reaction. There are some people that that would have made them so like, "You have disrespected me. You have disrespected my walls." Like, I was the adult that was allowing the child to color with a marker because I thought he was gonna like, "Okay, he's just gonna stay here. I'm right here. I'm not gonna miss it." Totally missed it. He's fast. He's real, real fast. He's a lot like me, and sometimes the child that's a lot like you will sometimes bring up things for you in some ways, and then sometimes the child that like, your child is completely different from you, sometimes that will bring up things too. But it is my responsibility to manage whatever comes up for me. It's not my child's. Now my child is responsible for his behavior. So our rule in the house. So after dinner, he normally gets a dessert. He likes to eat that while he watches like a little TV before bed. And like before like bath time, all that, nighttime routine. And our rule is he can eat there as long as he cleans up his area. And I remind him because I mentioned it here before. We are monitoring for signs of ADHD. Him remembering to do things is like I can tell him, don't forget to throw away the trash. He'll be like, mm-hmm. 2 minutes later, trash. Normally it's the next morning. I go back down, trash is still there, and I don't get upset. So I don't yell, I don't scream at him. It's like I call his name, I ask him to come here, I show it to him, and he's like, "Oops," and he goes, "Mistakes are how we learn." Like, "Yep. All right, so what's our consequence?" And he knows, "All right, I'm gonna have to eat dessert back at the dining room table, or, I'm gonna have to eat at the table tonight." Yep. And there's no emotion, there's no lecture, like, respect. I don't know. He's 6, almost 7. Like, he doesn't need a 5-10 minute lecture on like, he knows this is what he's supposed to do. He didn't do it. And even if he does something that does really irritate me, that does really frustrate me, now if it's safety related, I will let him know that's not safe. So my child, ton of energy, and there are times he's like trying to, I don't know, show himself how to do black backflips. Not quite, but like almost. And it's just like, buddy, that's not safe. We can go to a jump plate, we can go somewhere else, but like here at home, on the couch or on your bed, that's not safe. And I don't get into an argument about it with him. So if he's like, but mom, it's like, what did I say? That's not safe. Okay. I'm not gonna go back and forth over and over. With my child, I need to make sure that he's heard what I said. And if there are any times that I'm not sure, like, was he listening? I'm like, what did I say? And as long as he can repeat it back to me, I know in that moment he has it. Will he have it 10 minutes from now? We'll see. But that's where you know your kid. And if you are parenting a child that is neurodivergent, that whose brain works different, I have to make certain adjustments. I have to make certain accommodations. And my first thing can't be, he's just lazy. Because sometimes we judge the behavior, we assign this thing. So my kid, he just forgets. Like at the end of the night, the whole throwing away his trash, he doesn't care. Like that's legit. Like he doesn't mind if he leaves the trash there. Like it's my issue, not his, but he is responsible for this one thing. And sometimes he will because I will tell him right before bed, I'm like, "Don't forget to throw away your trash." Like, I try to give reminders. Sometimes, okay, he still forgets, and it is what it is. And that's another thing that I sometimes tell myself is, "It is what it is." And it doesn't mean that it doesn't bother me, it doesn't mean that I don't care in this moment. Because if I go down in the morning and his trash is there, in that moment, all I can do is have him throw it away. So every night, I don't go back behind him to check to make sure that the trash is thrown away. Because honestly, so I forget too. Sometimes I leave my stuff, and so I have some compassion and empathy. Like I know, like, yeah, buddy, Yep. And that's why I eat at the table. I try as soon as I'm done eating, I try to, put my stuff away. But like we'll see. I still have my plate from lunch and it's almost 4 o'clock. I have bottles of water. I have like trash from earlier. Like I get it, kid. I get it. And as a parent, I remind myself that like being a kid, it's hard because sometimes we try to compare our life now as a 40 almost 2-year-old woman to like what it means to be 6. But for him being 6, his priority is having a good time. Like that's his priority. And my inner child appreciates that he has the space to be him. Now, I will ask my child to say something again because my kid, sometimes he'll say something and the tone, how he said it was demanding or it was not an appropriate tone. And I'll just say, the way you said that, the words, okay, but how you said it, let's try that again. Let's take a breath together, like whatever we need to do. Let's try that one again. Phrase that like a question instead of "You need to do this." Hmm, hmm, let's let's rewind. Let's go back. Let's phrase that like a question. And I like it when kids try to get their way. That's what they're supposed to do. If you have a kiddo that lies, one of the worst things you can do is ask them a question that you already know the answer to. And the reason why I say that is because if I ask my child, "Did you do your homework?" It's so easy to just say yes because they're in the middle of playing their game. "Did you do your homework?" "Yeah." Instead of if I say, "Pause your game," or as soon as you're like, if they're in a battle or like they're in something that they can't pause, as soon as you finish that, "Show me your homework." Instead of, "Did you?" No, show me your homework. "Okay. Bring me your book bag. Let's take a look through it. Let's organize it. Let's get it together." And for my kiddo, he's like I said, he just finished first grade this past school year. I went through his book bag on my own, not every day, but like every few days because things would gather, things would collect, and he's not at a stage where I expect him to do that independently. And when he is in middle school, if he's not able to do that independently, if he needs support, or if I need to write down the steps of organizing your book bag, and he can do it like a little checklist one by one, because some kiddos, they legit don't know the steps. Like, if you tell them, "Go and clean your room." I did that to my kid the other day, because he needed to go and clean his room, and I asked him, "What are the steps?" And he was like, "Pick up my toys, pick up my clothes." I was like, "Yep." And so he went upstairs. He was up there for a little bit, and I went up, and I could see just stuff under his bed. I was like, "Don't forget, you have to pick it all up from under your bed." He was like, "Oh, okay." And he did a he I was like, "And don't forget to make your bed." I was like, "Okay." So I gave him the steps. He was able to do it. He did it to about like 80%, and he wasn't quite at a place of like organizing his desk. And something that we had been working on for a while is he likes to color on the floor, but he always leaves the crayons all over my carpet. And in my mind, I'm just like, this crayon is going to get into my carpet. My issue, not his. Okay. Has anything got into the carpet with all the crayons and markers that he's left on the floor with the top off? Has it gotten into the carpet? No, but every time I see it, it bothers me. Okay, so I tell him, like, "Hey, when you're done coloring, put it up. When you're done coloring, put it up." That wasn't working. So it's like our new rule is because he has a desk in his room, color at your desk. Because before the desk was just covered with toys. This was not a learning desk. Because normally when he does his homework after school, we normally do it, just at like the table where we eat. He normally doesn't do his homework independently in his room anyway. But this would be a perfect place to color. So you keep your markers off my floor. I didn't say that part. I thought that part in my head. But in my head, I'm thinking, gotta figure out a plan to keep these markers off of my floor. I just got to. And we'll see how it goes. We'll see. My tip for parents is when you find something that works, it might work for a period of time and then it might stop working and we might have to adjust and try something different. And let's go ahead and talk about historical trauma because that's why we got into all of this. How past generations can impact our mental well being. And I want to specifically talk about parenting. I'm going to make sure to link any articles or resources that I share during this. I will share them down in the description. In our journey through life, we carry our experiences and echoes of our ancestors' struggles and triumphs. So their wins as well, not only their trauma. Historical trauma, also called intergenerational trauma, refers to the cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over an individual's lifespan and across generations, emanating from massive group trauma experiences. And there are a lot of different individuals that we know as collective groups have these types of experiences. And as a nation, we also have 9/11. I just started the work week, so I'm recording this on July 16th, 2024. There was just a recent attempt on President Trump, former President Trump, just over on Saturday, just this past weekend, and that was a collective moment. Thankfully, he it was just a graze, but still, that was kind of a collective moment. And in that moment, I was glad to be on a call. I just so happened to be on a Zoom call with my family. We were able to process it, talk about our fears, talk about our concerns, talk about our triumphs, our goals. And it was just good to be able to experience that with a safe group. And but some individuals may not be affected by the historical trauma, yet others might suffer from diminished physical and mental well being. People who suffer from historical trauma can experience reduced self worth, depressive episodes, SH, uh, and significant inclination towards uh, aggression, problems with. Issues, thoughts of unaliving, and then also heart issues as well. I've also seen that there can also be autoimmune issues that can come up as well. The science behind historical trauma. So this goes through some of the DNA, some of the epigenetic inheritance that they've seen with stress or anxiety. This is why even when I was pregnant with my child, I took a class called Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents because I knew I managed my own anxiety and I wanted to make sure that if my child had a significant struggle with anxiety or like how to not put my stuff onto him. I wanted to be able to manage my issues. And that's a book by Lynn Lyons and Reed Wilson. I'm going to have a resource list that I will share towards the end. And I will have that linked down in the description as well. All right. Addressing the impact of historical trauma, and there are lots of different ways that we can do that. And I think one of the things that we can do is looking at parenting strategies. And here is another source. What is positive discipline? 5 ways to nurture well behaved and confident children. Because I think sometimes when people think about gentle parenting or conscious parenting or positive discipline, they often think you're just going to let the kid do whatever they want to do. No, that's permissive parenting or that's uninvolved parenting. That is not it at all. I try to nurture my child versus demand blind obedience. So, what is blind obedience? That's something that I've mentioned on here multiple times. I think that deserves its own resource. And once again, I'll link this down below. This is from The Therapist Parent. Cooperation, not obedience, is a goal of parenting. So, blind obedience is just, I told you to clean your room. You don't ask me any questions. You go and clean your room, and that's it. Like, no ifs, ands, and buts about it. I told you to go clean your room. You go and clean your room. And if I ask my child, because let's say my child is like playing a game, and I'm like, all right, you need to go and clean your room right now. In our household, for me, my child can say, "Hey, mom, I'm in the middle of my game. Can I finish this first?" I was like, "Sure." Like, as long as the room gets, yes. I'll give you, sometimes I have to give 'em a time limit. Sometimes I set an Alexa timer just to make sure, but to say, "Okay, you have 10 more minutes, 15 more minutes, you have 30 more minutes, and then I need you to go and clean your room." What works better is before he gets on a game, before he goes and does the thing he wants to do, that I ask him to do the thing that he needs to do. Before he does the thing he wants to do, I'll often try to get that other thing out of the way first. That doesn't always happen. Every parent's different. For me, like, my kiddo doesn't have to make his bed every day, so I don't even make my bed, so that's probably why it's not a rule of mine, because I don't I pull the covers back sometimes. My husband does, not all the time, because he always pulls back his side. I don't always do that. But, I think each person just does things their way, and, my goal is to have this cooperative relationship, and while there is a hierarchy, it's not a dictatorship. And what I mean by that is my child can ask me questions. If he doesn't understand why I'm asking him to do something, now if I say, "Don't run in the street," he's like, "Why? Why do you think?" Like, that's what I'm like, "Hey, let's use our thinking brains." Why? And because he would say, "It's not safe." Because we don't go in back. If it's about safety, it's like, then that's my whole thing. It's just, it's not safe. Okay. But if I say, "Okay, your consequence for not putting up your trash after you ate dessert is you don't get to eat here anymore," he's like, "I don't think that's fair." It's like, "Wait a minute, let's take a breath. Say it, don't whine it." Like, take a breath. I can hear you. I can hear, like, let's manage the emotion first, if you can. Now, if my child is in the middle of a meltdown, the first goal is going to be calm, to get him calm. But after that, the goal is gonna be to, get him to a place where he can ask for what he wants without trying to use, like, "Can I please?" Say it to me. Say it to me so I can hear you. My ears work better when you just say it. We go there. We all want our children to do what we ask. Life would be simple if they just did what we ask when we ask, right? But that's not the goal of parenting. Well, shouldn't it be? Our goal is to help our child develop, gain their own values and problem solve their own difficulties. They can't do this mindlessly, doing what we say at every moment. We can't expect children to just do what we want. They are human beings with emotions and opinions of their own. And now, the one thing I do want to teach my child is how to disagree appropriately and how to accept no as an answer. So if my child says, "Can I have another dessert at dinner?" "Nope." "Why not?" Like, "Mommy, can I ask why?" "You've already had enough sugar." Like, that's normally the thing. My child normally doesn't argue, normally doesn't ask things like that. The thing that he might have more questions about is time limits around TV or game time, or, specific bedtimes, and, and that's where, as the parent, I listen. His opinion is valuable. I wanna hear it, and yet I'm still mom. So, I heard you. I know this is what you want, and this is the time when that would be appropriate. So, hey, right now, you wanna be able to stay up until 10 p.m. Okay, well, you're 6, you're 7. That's not what we're gonna do right now. Now, when we go on vacation, he stays up later. The one thing about my kiddo, I don't know about yours, but even when he stays up late, he still normally wakes up really, really early. And when he does not get enough sleep, he's very much like his mother, and he is not pleasant. Like, he can be irritable, and like, we're gonna have a more difficult day if he doesn't get enough sleep, if he's not well rested. And so that's why, as a parent, certain things, and also like bedtime is my time. Like, let's just be honest. Like, once he goes to bed, like, I get to, okay, he's in bed. Now I'm gonna go watch whatever I want to watch. Like, it's bedtime, my time. I also do quiet time with our child on a date. Yeah, if he's home, if he doesn't have school, he has what we call quiet time, and that's from 1 to 3 p.m. Sometimes, because he'll sometimes interrupt the stream on a Saturday, where he'll come in and ask for something, ask for the iPad, normally 2:30. So about 30 minutes before the end, he can sometimes watch something educational or he can watch YouTube Kids. And so being able to have boundaries, but not walls, not something that's so rigid where my child can't think for himself, he can't ask me questions, and he thinks that his opinion doesn't matter. It's like, no, like his opinion matters, uh, and yet he won't always get what he wants. We had to have that conversation earlier this summer. You won't always get what you want, and we have to stick with the choices that we make and the consequences of those choices as well. How is cooperation different from obedience? If your expectation is obedience, then changes are often hit with a power struggle. Yelling, punishments, manipulation, and fear become the ways you get your child to do what you want. This will lead to your children pushing boundaries more as they try to gain control and independence. Power struggles will escalate, or it will cause blind obedience, which I think may be even worse. Is blind obedience really what we want? No. Do we want a child who will grow up to be someone who will just do as they're told, never challenging authority, peer pressure, or if they're being mistreated? Of course not. Like it or not, we are our child's practice space for life. As a safe space, there can be more conflict at times, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's our job to teach them how to have their say and questions decisions when they need to in the appropriate way. Cooperation, on the other hand, means that your expectations are explained and you invite your child to think of ways to meet these. It doesn't mean that your child does whatever they want. It does mean that they are given choices and have some control over what they do. There are still boundaries, but you work things out together rather than my way or the highway attitude, which, in my opinion, can kind of go back to some of that generational trauma as well, where it's like children are expected to be seen and not heard or not really valued as members of, society and all of that. Positive discipline is not, a set of rules, it's a philosophy that seeks to create a nurturing environment for children to learn and grow. It's an evidence-based parenting approach that's rooted in kindness and empathy, and there are still boundaries and all of that. Discipline means to teach, and all behavior is communication. And I do use like natural consequences, because that's the natural consequence. If you don't clean up after eating, your dessert in your preferred spot, natural consequences, you're gonna have to eat at the table. And I don't do it for an excessive amount of time. So it's normally just one night. So if he forgets to put it away one night, then the next night he's back eating at the table and then he gets to try again. Make sure to not give excessive punishments. That's what can that I cover I cover legal cases, and there have been legal cases that I've covered where the parents were excessive. The child could have had some learned helplessness because there was no way to escape the parents' expectations. There was no way for the child to be successful because the parent wasn't being reasonable, and the punishments were just excessive and long and all of that, which can sometimes make a kid just kind of give up, or it can make behaviors escalate, right? And so I have this linked below. I truly hope that this has been a helpful resource. You all know that I'm also working on a book to talk about this, and I will stop and share some of my Amazon parenting books. So if you click on the link, I have an Amazon shop, and there are self-help books. There are parenting and child resources. Those are the ones that I'm going to go through now. I do have some of my things from my YouTube studio or different things that I've worn, and then also travel essentials. And so I'm going to click on parenting, and here these are just some of my top parenting resources and books. I'm a big fan of The Whole Brain Child. I think it gives a good foundation for the neurobiology behind child development and parenting expectations, all those things. There are books for kids, a little spot. There are lots of books on a little spot of frustration, a little spot of anger. There are all of these little spot books. Taking charge of ADHD. If you have a child with ADHD, the Yes Brain. And this is another book by Dr. Dan Siegel, and it's about cultivating courage and curiosity. Because some kids have a no brain, where it's like everything's like no. They don't want to try new things. Everything is just kind of no. And this is a good resource. He also has No Drama Discipline. That's another book of his. I have this book right over here. Let's talk about body boundaries, consent, and respect. I really like this book because it talks about body autonomy and that, even babies, like if a baby's like, starts to cry and doesn't, that means the baby doesn't want to be held. And I'm a fan of that book. Very Intentional Parenting by Destiny Ann Davis. She is on TikTok and Instagram. She does have a YouTube as well. She's a parent educator, and her resources have been just really helpful for me as a parent and then clients as well. The Connected Parent is a resource for adoptive parents, or if you are involved in the foster care system. It's from the Trust Based Relational Intervention, TBRI. It's a great book for talking about in order to parent, my child first has to know that I care. We have to be connected. And their first book was The Connected Child. And this next book was The Connected Parent, because the parent is the one with the fully developed brain. And I really like that they shifted the narrative instead of that, like, the child needs to connect. It's like, okay, well, the parent needs to be a safe person to connect to. Here I have that book, Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents. That's one of my favorites. Oh, this is Dr. Laura Markham. I believe she has a website as well. Peaceful Parent, Happy Kids. The Explosive Child, if you're parenting a child that has explosions, always consult with your medical provider. Yes, Raising Good Humans is another one that I like. How to Stop Losing Your Shit with Your Kids. Like sometimes it's a bestseller because I have to manage me because my kid is gonna do what I do. And that's another, like, breaking generational trauma, the whole, like, "Do what I say, not as I do." It's like, "No, like, that's not how it works." Like, kids are going to do what you do, and they're not gonna listen to what you say. And so if I as a parent, if I don't have a good self-esteem, it's gonna be hard for my child. It's possible, like a lot of therapy, but it's gonna be harder for my child. If I work on me, that helps me be at a better space to take care of my child. And that's when I really started prioritizing my own self-care. I went back to my own therapy and just really knew, like, in order for me to show up and be there for my child, I needed to be okay, and that if I'm not okay, like, like, it's not gonna be good. And that's why even as a therapist, I shifted from mostly working with children to working more with adults, especially adults that have histories of trauma, because sometimes we do better than our parents, but I also wanna make sure that I'm not passing on trauma too. I'm sure Trauma Proofing Your Kids is in here somewhere. That's another one of my favorite books, but there's a lot. I like resources. I do. If your kiddo has trouble sleeping, if you think they'd benefit from a weighted blanket, you just check to make sure not in so this is there's certain age ranges and weights based on your child's weight. I use a weighted blanket for myself. It just kind of helps soothe. It helps me sleep. I did go back to coffee for anybody that was keeping track for when I stopped with coffee. I did go back. Here is an alarm. This is my favorite little clock. There are other versions of it, but my kid, oh my gosh, like, he used to come and wake me up at, like, 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning, and now he knows. So in the future, if my child hates the time, 7:20 AM, it's because, like, he wasn't supposed if it wasn't an emergency, if he wasn't, like, wet or if he, as long as he was okay, please do not wake mommy up before 7:20, and the sun would come up on this little clock. went at 7:20 AM. So if the moon was still out, that meant that he was still supposed to be asleep. Like, you're in bed, quiet, something. Which really meant mommy still gets to sleep. And so we use this little, like, sleep training clock. It doesn't work for every person, but, like, my kiddo did respect the clock. I would also, look at my watch as well, when he would come in to be like, no, buddy, I have 20 more minutes." And I'm milking every single one of them unless it was an emergency and I would get up. And so I truly hope that this has been helpful. If this raises any additional questions or anything, please let me know. Y'all know that I am working on a book. Hopefully it'll be out by the end of the year. Who knows? I'm at the early stages, okay? I have some chapter ideas, I have some ideas. Doing this gives me more like ideas, but if there are things that you definitely want for me to include, things that you definitely like to know or learn more about, especially as a parent, feel free to let me know. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.